Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, we're talking Dodgers prospects with the biggest prospect expert there is, Keith Law of The Athletic. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go and subscribe wherever you're watching and listening right now, and then you will never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time with us, my name is Jeff Snider. My co-host is Vince Samperio, although it's just me today. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And I said it's just me today. That's a dirty lie. It's actually me and Keith Law of The Athletic. We are talking about the Dodgers prospects. Our conversation will be today's episode and Monday's episode. Today, we're talking about Diego Cartaya, Miguel Vargas, Michael Busch, Bobby Miller, and Gavin Stone. So without further ado, I am just going to jump straight into my conversation with Keith Law. Okay, I am here with Keith Law of The Athletic. Keith is a prospect hound, knows everything there is to know about prospects, and we're going to ask him to tell us everything that he knows, and we'll see how much we can fit in the next half hour or so. But Keith recently released his top 100 prospects list and his team rankings for farm systems, and I'm not going to say, well, Keith's is the best list, and I'm not just saying that because he has the Dodgers as the best farm system in baseball. But I got to admit, it doesn't hurt, Keith. So thank you for joining me on the show. I appreciate it. I always enjoy talking prospects with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I think we'll save for the end the talk of the overall farm system and what puts them at number one. I just want to jump in and start talking about individual players. And the easiest way to arrange this is probably just going in the order that you rank them. The Dodgers have 8 players in your top 100, and starting with Diego Cartaya at number 6. And Cartaya, I was comparing what you wrote about Cartaya last year compared to this year, specifically defensively. The defense is always interesting to me just because a prospect of Cartaya's level, a lot is going to depend on whether he can stay at catcher. Because catchers are the most valuable players on the field. Last year, you said Cartaya is going to be a monster at the plate with patience and power, and he's improving as a defender across the board with enough of a baseline to leave no doubt that he'll stay at the position. This year, you wrote he's already better on defense than he was a year ago, but he can catch the ball too close to his body, limiting him probably to fringe average receiving at his peak, and he's had some trouble throwing out runners despite plus arm strength. So I kind of just want to ask you, what are your overall thoughts on Cartaya? Is Cartaya going to be a major league catcher?
Yes, in my opinion, he is. And one thing that we see with catching prospects is as they move up the ladder through the minors, we get to see them catching better quality stuff and also catching pitchers who can locate their stuff a little more effectively. And that allows us to more clearly identify where a catcher needs to improve as a receiver or as a thrower or blocker, et cetera. Basically everything but framing. Framing is its own animal, really. And if you notice in my report last year on Cartaya, I was kind of non-specific. And this year I was able to be a lot more specific in where, not just me, but where scouts think he needs to improve as a catcher. Obviously, catching the ball very close to your body, it limits your ability to move around and catch to cover the whole zone. I think it also makes it harder on the transfer, right? Just literally just hold your hand a couple inches further out from your chest and closer to your chest, and then imagine trying to take the invisible ball and put it into your throwing hand and get into a position too where you're able to make the throw. And I think that is certainly something that Cartaya or others can improve on. It is not like a fatal flaw. It's not like, Austin Wells with the Yankees, where I've just seen that guy box enough balls that I think he's not a catcher. That's not Cartaya. But this is something he's going to need to work on. And I think he has to at least address it somewhat before he becomes a big league catcher. Like I said, I think it's fixable, and I'm not trying to give anyone any doubt that he is a catcher, but it's there. And because we saw him, we only saw him about 33 games, I think, the year before also. This year, saw him a lot more, saw him at different levels in different environments, catching much better quality stuff. And I think as a result, everyone's got a better sense of where he is and what he still needs to do.
And speaking of the levels of the minor leagues, offensively, I mean, he's only played as high A so far.
Mm-hmm.
What as a scout looking at a player, how confident can you be in his ultimate hitting ability when he hasn't faced higher pitching yet so far?
What we're able to do, and this is on the scouting side and also on the data side, we can, if you talk to scouts, I'll set the data side aside for a moment. When scouts go out to see players, when I go out to see players, I'm not actually a scout, but I kind of do what they do on a smaller scale. But one thing we take very seriously is the competition that someone is facing. So I have seen plenty of guys especially in the low minors, feast on bad pitching, whether it is guys who don't throw hard or guys who don't have good secondaries, guys who have a real platoon issue, bad delivery, command, whatever. I know what it looks like, right? This came up with a Cubs prospect named Matt Mervis, where I saw him homer twice in the fall league, and they were both on hanging breaking balls that were like high school level breaking pitches. That's not very telling, right? There's no predictive value in somebody being able to hit the kind of pitch he's probably never going to see in the majors. He might not even see much of that in AAA. And so for someone like Cartaya, who is destroying, and at an age-appropriate level, destroying the pitching he's facing, the question for scouts and then also for analysts is, what does he do against the good pitching, right? Is he really kills fastballs? Well, not all fastballs are created equal. I mean, the first thing we can look at is velocity, and there's obviously more to a fastball than that. And we know better than ever now. But, if a guy hits fastballs, but he's really struggling against 94, 95 plus, and scouts can see this too. We know what we're looking at. It's why it's often useful if you're a scout going out to a game, you may not really be trying to write up the pitcher. Maybe you've seen him before. You just kind of know he's not a prospect, but you do want to generally know what his stuff is so that you can better evaluate the hitters here. And Cartaya hits good stuff. Now, I got this back in spring training, even not that I had a lot of doubt beforehand, but a scout I'm friendly with just caught him in spring training and saw him hammering good fastballs. And he actually, at that point, the scout was not even totally sold on him. It's like, well, this guy clearly hits velocity, and not everybody can, right? Not everybody can get to 95 plus and then do something with it. And Cartaya was already doing that. And I think there's a pretty high degree of confidence as well coming out of this season. Again, based on what scouts saw, what the data tells us, that he just hits good pitching, and he hits his offensive performance is likely to hold up as he moves up the ladder, because he hits the kind of pitching that he's just going to see more and more as he gets each step closer to the majors.
That's awesome. So last Cartaya question. I won't ask you to be too specific, but if for some reason the defense didn't work out, just based on Cartaya as a hitter, imagining him as a first baseman or a DH type, where would he still be a top 100 prospect? Where would he be in your rankings?
He'd still be a top 100 prospect. I think he's better than Kyle Manzardo, who's the one pure first baseman, I think, on the top 100, because just generally I don't rank guys who are just first base DH types very high. Because, and I'll miss sometimes, right? Jordan Alvarez was on one of my lists and then off the next one. And a lot of that was because he was a DH with questionable knees. He actually ended up having knee surgery, I think, on both knees, but then came back to basically be as good a player as you can be while being a DH, right? He clearly should have been on my list in hindsight. I will miss on those guys from time to time because that's a pretty high bar to clear, right? Jordan Alvarez hit the 99th percentile, basically. So Cartaya projects as something like that, as that kind of impact hitter, which is why he's in the top 10, right? The possibility that he's a catcher, even if he's costing you 5+ runs a year on defense, the bat is so special for that position, he's still going to be an MVP type player. But I think the bat is good enough that if he had to move to first base or DH, he would still be a very, very good, very valuable player and one of the top 5 at his position in all of baseball when he gets to his peak.
Awesome. Let's take a quick break from my conversation with Keith Law to tell you this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. So download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. You want to bet on who scores first? You can do that. You want to bet on who throws the first interception? You can do that. Anything you want to bet on, you can find it at FanDuel. The FanDuel Sportsbook is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Moving on, Miguel Vargas. He's number 23 on your list. Had a pretty big jump. I think he was number 62 last year. And I guess, he's another guy who the bat and the defense are two really different questions. Vargas, it seems like nobody doubts that he's going to hit in the big leagues. Is that your sense?
Yes, everyone agrees he's going to hit because and all he's ever done is hit. Going back to the first time I ever considered him from one of my lists was 2019. I actually got talked out of it by multiple people. And I mean, kind of in hindsight, I wish I'd put him on because all he's done since then is hit.
And defensively, he's been a third baseman. And you seem to be, in this year's list, seem to be high on the improvements he's made defensively. You wrote, his body has improved substantially since he first broke out in 2019 when scouts questioned whether he'd get too heavy or slow-footed for third base. Now he's a plus runner, and there's no doubt he could stay at third or handle second. It looks like he's going to be the Dodgers, or at least have the starting second base job is his to lose for the Dodgers this year. Is that something you think he can hold down? And does the banning of the shift come into the conversation as far as his ability to do it?
The answer to the second question is no. And to be honest, I haven't given a lot of weight to the banning of the shift because in my opinion, in my history as a writer / working in the front office, I feel like we are just very bad at an industry at accurately projecting what things like rule changes are going to do. Major League Baseball is terrible at it, right? They get kind of everything wrong. He's joked the Bud Selig era was the era of unintended consequences, and his successor has just been more of the same. They try to change rules. They say, well, this is going to help competitive balance. Oh, well, it actually did was increase profits for owners with low payrolls who don't want to spend. So I don't really know how much banning the shift is going to matter. I think teams will still find ways to not necessarily get around it, but try to minimize the impact of losing it. We've got really good data on batted balls and hitter tendencies. You're still going to see a lot of fielders moving around and getting to the right places. And I think it's probably going to end up not being that important. Of all the rule changes this winter, I thought that was the dumbest one. And, it's the first time I think in baseball history, we've ever said, don't try too hard to win. Which is basically what that rule says to me. Vargas has, originally when Vargas was 19 in A-ball, when he kind of first broke out, it was like, well, he can hit. We don't know if he can play third. He's kind of heavy-footed. He doesn't move that well. The more that he's played, and I think he's done some work as well, but it's become very clear, this guy's a much better athlete than anybody's giving him credit for, and he's pretty fast running in a straight line. Like, I don't know if that really translates to game speed and baseball game speed. If he were in another sport, maybe it would matter a little bit more. But the fact that he moves the way he does, and I think has worked pretty hard to be better defensively, gives me much, much more confidence that he's going to end up not just able to play third or second, but maybe actually probably better at third, but maybe actually end up an asset on defense. Second base is just tough. We often think of second base as the the easier position, like if you don't have arm strength, for example, but there's a lot of turning, a lot of lateral agility that comes into play, and you can get away with some of that, having less of that at third base. I feel like he probably still fits better at third, but if the job that's open turns out to be second, then play him at second, right? Just get this guy's bat in the lineup. He's the most ready. I mean, they have a good problem to have. I think I mentioned this might be in the piece that hasn't run yet, but between Busch, Outman, and Vargas, that's three guys who are pretty much ready for the big leagues, and they don't have jobs for all of them.
Yeah, for sure. And those the differences at second base defensively, like you talk about the different types of agility and different moves, are those things that we'll just have to wait and see how he does at second base, or is there any parallels to the positions he has played more of that we can kind of guess how he'll be?
I don't have his stats in front of me, but he's mostly played third base, right? So I don't want to I talked to a lot of scouts who've seen him honestly over the last, well, I guess it'd be 4 years. Well, I guess 2020 doesn't count, right? So it's 3 seasons over a period of 4 years, right? We have not had a look. I'm actually pulling it up to make sure I'm just not talking out of the
Yeah,
air
I think
here,
he's only played a total of like 30 games at second base in his entire
not
minor
even
league career.
7 games last year in total. Well, I didn't talk to anybody who saw any of that. So I talked to Dodgers folks, which is different. It's 57 innings last year. It's not a ton. Certainly, we're not going to glean anything from the data. The Dodgers people think he can do it. They say he's way more athletic than people give him credit for. The truth is, we just haven't seen a whole lot of it. And so it's also could be one of those where they bring him up, they try him, the game speeds up. It's obviously the pace of not the pace in terms of viewership, but the game is faster at the big league level. Balls are hit harder, things happen at a much quicker pace. Maybe he doesn't adjust to that. I would try it. And then if he's got to move back to third base, he moves back to third base. They have the nice thing for the Dodgers. They have a lot of options.
Yeah. And, I'm going to break what I said. I said I was going to go in the order that you ranked them, but I feel like we've segued pretty well into Michael Busch here, listed at number 74 for you. It seems like there's not going to be a place for him to play. If Vargas is the Dodgers second baseman, Freddie Freeman is the Dodgers first baseman, and then, left field seems like the only option for Busch at this point. Have you seen Busch in left field? Is his bat good enough to be a left fielder in the big leagues?
His bat might be. I mean, he loses a good bit of value if he's not playing second, right? This guy's actually turned out to be a reasonably capable second baseman. And the bat will certainly play at second base, gives him a chance to be, I think, more an above average regular. I don't know that there's really a star in there necessarily. But I think you could see an above average regular there if he's at second. If he's at left, if he goes back to first, you're probably hoping for an average everyday guy. I think you cut off some of your upside there. And I don't think he's going to be a particularly good defensive left fielder. I don't think he'll be Brian Klesko out there, but I don't think he's going to be any more than like a fringy defender out there, just because of his size and how well he moves, or how well he doesn't move, I guess, in terms of the ability to cover a fair bit of ground out there.
Okay. Is Ryan Klesko always your go-to for a bad defensive left fielder?
He really is. At some point I have to stop because no one's going to remember who he was. I just think of him as or Jason Giambi was kind of like that when the A's tried him out there. It was just sort of like, get him a helmet before he hurts somebody or himself. So yeah, we try to do that. I mean, Jordan Alvarez is a bit like that too. They stick him out there. It's like, oh God, just don't get hurt, right? And I think
can't he just bat all the time? Can we have a second
just DH, right? Just DH. It's fine. I mean, God, Houston, it's probably the lowest square footage of any left fielder's territory in baseball, and it was still a struggle for him. But it's a good thing he can really hit.
It's kind of like Manny Ramirez in Boston.
Yes, my favorite Onion headline of all time. Manny Ramirez asks Red Sox if he can work from home.
Oh, he probably did. Let's take one last break to tell you this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat that's not terrible for you, in fact, it's really good for you, check out Built Bar. It tastes like a candy bar, but without all the guilt, because it is low sugar, low carb, low calorie, high protein, high fiber, all the good stuff, none of the bad stuff, and especially the good stuff, the flavor. It's delicious. So they have a ton of different flavors, and the best part is these days, you don't even have to go online to order them. You need a Built Bar right now. You don't want to wait a couple days for Built to deliver them to you. run on down to your local Walmart. You got one of them? I bet you do. Walmart now has Built Bar in stock. Sam's Club has Built Bar in stock. So either of those, you can go and buy Built Bar right off the shelf. If you do want to order online, you use the promo code LOCKEDON15, LOCKEDON15. That'll get you 15% off. But if you need a Built Bar right now, head on down to Walmart, pick one up, your favorite flavor, whatever flavor you like, go grab it, and you can thank me later. All right, going back then, let's go to Bobby Miller, number 28 on your list overall. And the first line of your blurb about Miller says, for pure stuff, Miller has few peers, if any, among minor league starter prospects. That's pretty exciting. And one of the things I thought was interesting that you identified was kind of one specific thing that if he can fix this one thing, he's going to be one of the best pitchers in baseball, and that is pitching from the stretch. He is noticeably worse with runners on base. And is that something that was your blurb was the first time I had seen that specific flaw pointed out? Is that something that's well recognized throughout the industry? And do you think he's going to be able to fix that?
I do think he's going to be able to fix it. Frankly, he's already improved so much just since he was drafted in 2020. And he's pretty athletic and pretty, in the sense of being able to make physical adjustments. Yeah, I think he hasn't got it. I mean, if he really can't, right, you just modify the windup as little as possible, and right, just stop worrying about the runners. You're going to strike everybody out anyway. And so I'm not terribly worried about it. And obviously I ranked him very aggressively, right, on the assumption that basically this guy's got ridiculous stuff and good enough, certainly enough control. And I think he'll get to enough command that he's got a chance to be a number one starter. It is an issue, though. You have to be able to pitch with runners on base. Nobody gets to pitch with nobody on base all the time. So it is something to look out for. And, he loses a little stuff. He loses a little command. That's usually delivery related. And although I don't consider this specifically in the rankings, since this is a Dodgers podcast too, he's in the right organization, right? If he's got to get some delivery help, mechanical help, I trust the Dodgers on that. They've got a pretty good track record. Hitters and pitchers, they've got a really good track record. And I know they've identified it, and I believe that if they haven't already been working on it, I'm sure that they will be working on it. Because it is, I think most people thought Miller would have a better season, blow through the minors, get to the majors, be ready to take a rotation spot at this point. And he had a couple little hiccups there. There's definitely some questions. In the fastball, it's up to 101, 102, and it's really lively. Like, hitters do hit it a little bit more than they should. And I wonder if that's also a bit delivery related / what's happening when he's trying to pitch from the stretch versus when he's pitching with nobody on base.
Yeah. Something you mentioned that I hadn't really thought of is maybe the solution. If you can't figure it out, then the solution is just pretend there's nobody on base and I think of Dwight Gooden, like that leg kick that Dwight Gooden had from the stretch. It's like, I haven't looked at the numbers. I assume that people stole bases at will against Dwight Gooden. And when he was at his peak, it didn't matter because very few guys were getting on base to start with.
Yep. And I mean, I joked about that with Cole Franklin, who's a Cubs prospect, who I saw, he was Cy Young for me in spring training, right? It was just unbelievable, Bobby Miller type stuff. And I think he had a 6 ERA in the minors last year. And it was like, what the hell happened? You looked at it, he had an even more exaggerated split between runners on, bases empty. And the difference in it was even more, there was some fall off and stuff. It was way more command, location. And he just, I was like, at this point, just freaking pitch from the windup all the time, right? Because you're going nowhere. In that case, it's more stark. He is nothing if he's getting hammered like that with men on base. I would just say, just pitch from the windup, let them steal, because the stuff is so good that he will be able to keep a lot of those guys from scoring. Then maybe later you work on it, right? You work, okay, let's try to modify the delivery, et cetera. But you don't want that to be the reason a pitcher who has all of the other ingredients doesn't get to the majors or doesn't get to be a major league starter.
Hey, MLB wants to increase base runner. Maybe they should just say nobody's allowed to pitch from the stretch anymore.
There you go.
How's that?
Yeah.
Hey, Rob Manfred, if you're listening, and I assume you are.
It's a freebie.
There's a rule for you. Gavin Stone, number 39 in your top 100. One of the things that was interesting to me, so I've been reading through all of the different outlets' top 100 lists recently, and Baseball America had a video last week or a couple weeks ago talking about, they said that basically Gavin Stone scrapped his slider and went to an entirely different version of the slider midseason to more of a sweeper. Did you see that version or the old version or both?
So I actually have not seen Gavin Stone in person. This is entirely from folks who saw him over the course of the year. I know that for much of the year, he was still using that downward breaking slider. It might be that he's just incorporating both at this point. Obviously, a lot of teams, the Yankees notably, really like that sweepy slider. Some people call it the whirlybird slider. It can be very effective. I think it's really good for pitchers who do tend to pitch a little bit more north-south. And I think that's generally been true of Stone, where it's a lot of fastball up, change up, down. So if it gives him a little bit more of a horizontal look, I think that does help. And the slider was not, it was his third pitch before that. So I don't have, like I said, I don't have personal looks on Stone. And frankly, the scouts I spoke to were more talking about the more vertical slider that he was using in the video that I've seen, which is from AA, I believe. He was still using that. His slider had much more vertical break. Maybe we'll see it more this season rather than so much at the end of last season. Sometimes guys, just take time to incorporate it in. If he really does have that, he probably could. There's no reason he couldn't use both, certainly, unless he feels uncomfortable doing so. Obviously, it's about what he wants to do and what gives him the best feel and the best command of the pitch, certainly. But I know that without checking specific game dates right now, I saw quite a bit of video from him throughout the season, spoke to scouts who saw him at multiple stops, and it was more of that vertical breaking ball. I'm not disputing in any way what Baseball America said, by the way. I don't want people to be like, Keith Law said they're wrong. Not at all. We all have different information. They may have something I didn't. That's completely fine. But I know what I saw from him, and the scouts that I talked to were still talking about that vertical breaking ball. And that, like I said, it could make him a little bit too north-south. So I think there's some logic in trying to give him a pitch with a little bit more horizontal break.
And then, with Stone, you talk about his command and how that's kind of the one thing maybe holding him back right now. But you also seem confident that he will get the command at least up to average. And, you say you're confident he'll end up at least a number 3 starter. And that it's something that, like, when you're used to watching the major leagues, number 3 starter doesn't excite you. But when you're talking about a prospect and saying, well, he's going to be at least a number 3 starter, that's a pretty good baseline to start from.
Yes. I think my readers at least have gotten more accustomed to understanding that when I say someone's a number 3 starter, even a number 4 starter, this is not derogatory. It's not an insult. Number 4 starters get $15 million a year in free agency. Teams are constantly looking for them. If your farm system is generating 3 and 4 starters for you, that's great. Your system is doing a great job at that point. Obviously, you want all your guys to be a 1. There aren't that many of them. I always argue there's probably only about 15 or so true number 1 starters in the big leagues at any given time, because a lot of teams have guys who are nominally number 1s who probably shouldn't be. And you could certainly get one of these other guys who'd be better and an actual number 1 for you. So if Gavin Stone turns out to be a number 3 starter when he was signed for like $100,000 in the 5th round, might have even been less. I mean, he was supposed to be a money saver pick in that 2020 draft. And I know the scout who drafted him, it's not like they thought he was nothing, but he's obviously exceeded even their expectations. It's one of those, if we knew he was this good, we would have taken him sooner, obviously. And I do think, I don't see anything in the delivery that says to me he's not going to improve the command. He's just got to keep pitching. And that is something that doesn't improve for everybody. Nothing's automatic, and it does come down to the player themselves. But based on, my history of just watching players and obviously asking about players, et cetera, there's nothing here that says to me he's not going to be able to get to average command in time. And that makes him a good mid-rotation starter. Somebody who's when I say a number 3, I'm saying he's number 3 on most teams, not just on a couple of teams. And, then I don't write this in the context of the team they're on, because obviously anybody can be traded at any time. But I'm saying Gavin Stone might be a number 3 starter on the Dodgers too. And that's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. The difference between, major leaguers and prospects, it reminds me a couple of years ago when Alex Verdugo was in the Dodgers organization, and somebody was telling me that they weren't that impressed with him and said, seems more like a Nick Markakis type of player. And I said, if you could guarantee that Verdugo is going to have Nick Markakis' career, 29 teams would be pounding on the door to trade for him right now.
Yep. Yeah, that's amazing. When did we get to the point where only a Nick Markakis.
Nick
type
Markakis doesn't
player
do it
is-
for me. Yeah.
Oh my God. Wow. You going that good, huh? Nick Markakis had a
Yeah.
shot at 3,000 hits. Like whether you
Yep.
like, whatever you think of him, if your system spits, I mean, Nick Markakis was what, the 8th pick in the draft? He was like, that's a win.
Never won an MVP though, so must have been lousy.
Clearly.
Okay, that will do it for today. I want to thank Keith so much for taking the time to talk prospects with me. As I mentioned, this is part one of a 2-part episode. Monday's episode will be the second half of my conversation with Keith, almost exactly the same length as this one. We'll be talking about the rest of the Dodgers prospects he ranked in his top 100. There's 3 more of those, and then a couple who barely missed. One guy who he's really excited about. A lot of cool stuff. And then we'll talk about why he ranked the Dodgers as his number 1 overall farm system for the second year in a row. So be sure to come back on Monday. Now that you're done here with your first listen, for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. Probably a lot of the guys you heard us talking about today. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. If you're not watching or listening to Locked On Dodgers every weekday morning, I'd love if you had 1 or 2 days a month of your rotation. If you have friends and family who love the Dodgers as much as you do, please tell them about the show. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, we'd love to hear your thoughts, comments in the comment section below. If you're listening on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you on social media or whatever. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at Vince Samperio. I'm on Twitter at Snydog, and the DMs are open in all of those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com. And our phone number for voicemails or text messages is 323-863-LOCK, 5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you on Monday.